have the world champion Domaraju Gukesh playing against Alan Pichot here. Alan, a strong grandmaster from Spain, originally from Argentina, but now representing Spain, is taking on Gukesh with the black pieces. This is round 4 of the World Rapid Championships 2025 happening in Qatar, Doha. Alan has until now had a very good start. He drew against MVL and beat two lower rated opponents, so he is on 2.5 out of 3. Gukesh saved himself from a lost position in round 1 but then confidently struck back with 2 wins, and now this encounter is going to be very exciting, and the players are ready. Let's get it rolling. 15 minutes plus 10 seconds increment, and we start here. Gukesh with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4, and Alan responds back with e5. Knight to f3, and we have knight coming out to c6. Gukesh waits for a bit. Generally, top players are going for the Italian or the Spanish in this position, but Gukesh goes for g3, a move that he played against Vishy Anand at the Global Chess League and seems to have faith in it to try it out even at this top level tournament. d3, and it's basically playing like the King's Indian setup, and bishop comes out to c5, and we have bg2, pawn to d6, and white castles here. h6 played by Alan. He's not trying to refute Gukesh's strategy, just playing normal chess. Pawn to h3, and I believe Gukesh will next go for the move c3 d4, but he goes king h2. He's just not touching any of his queenside pieces for the time being. Alan plays his pawn to a5, gaining space, and Gukesh goes c4. Yes, it does weaken the hold on the d4 square, but on the other hand, he does get quick development with knight c3, bishop e3, and so on. Knight comes to c3. Rook to e8 played. And now rook to b1. So he's trying to go perhaps for the a3 b4 push. Knight jumps in, you take, bishop takes, and now the knight comes to e2. So he's attacking the bishop. With the bishop moves, he wants to push f4. The bishop goes back to c5. Black's position is nice, but on the other hand, white's plan is very easy to execute. He goes f4, and I think the best way for black to play is b5, creating play on the queen side, and he does it. Well done by Alan. He's understanding the position well. He's creating his counterplay. He's trying to put pressure on Gukesh. And rook b8, another nice move here. Gukesh now brings his bishop to d2. He's eyeing the pawn on a5. And Alan plays his pawn to c6. He brings out his queen to defend the pawn. Bishop to c3. Putting pressure on this diagonal here. Pawn takes pawn. And now d takes makes a lot of sense. He takes back with the b pawn. Also very logical. And now rook takes rook. Queen takes rook. And the idea is to put the queen on a1 perhaps, to put even more pressure on this diagonal. Queen c7 played. And now Gukesh goes queen a1. He keeps up the pressure. Alan goes a4. He's playing this quite well. He's putting pressure on. Oh, Gukesh's maneuver now. Knight f g1. Going to f3 to put pressure on the e5 pawn. And so Alan goes knight h7. Maybe he wants to bolster the structure with f6. That's a very smart idea. Gukesh goes out with his knight. Pawn to f6 played. And maybe queen comes to d1. Queen a7 by Alan. And should Gukesh go d4 or not at some point is the big question. He goes queen c2. And I think black has managed to keep control here. a3 would be even a nice strong move. Also rook b8. He goes knight to f8. He's coming in from e6 maybe to d4. f5 played by Gukesh. He stops the move knight e6. And now bishop to d4. But this is not a good move. This seems like an error by Alan because it gives Gukesh a big chance. Let's see if Gukesh takes it. Because the idea is to take here, play c5, bring the bishop, knight d7, knight e5. That would be very good for black. Bishop takes, pawn to c5 played. What a nice pawn sacrifice by Gukesh. So if you take pawn takes pawn, which he has done, then queen to c4 and eventually rook c1, and you take this pawn on c5. And then d4 is weak, c6 is weak, a4 is weak. Many weaknesses here. So somehow, just from an even position with couple of moves, Gukesh has gotten a very nice comfortable position. And king h8 played here by Alan Pichot. And Gukesh goes rook c1. He brings his rook to the c file, putting pressure on c5. Rook to b8. And now instead of taking the pawn on c5, this is very nice move, queen f7. Oh, he goes and takes it. Queen f7 would have been a very pesky move. Takes, rook takes. It's still very much better for white. And rook b2 is a must to create counterplay on the a2 pawn. Alan Pichot goes rook to b2. Now knight takes pawn, makes a lot of sense. He takes the pawn on a2. The a pawn looks dangerous, but at the same time the black pieces are very passive. Gukesh goes pawn to g4. He wants to unpin his bishop by bringing the king out. And rook d2, attacking the pawn on d3. Gukesh comes back, rook c3, defends this, attacks this. And king to g8. It's a good move, smart move, trying to get the king back into the game. King comes up, and now king f7. Both kings coming in. Knight to f3, attacking the rook. And Gukesh's plan is to play d4 and e5 to get his central pawns rolling. Rook to b2 played. And he pushes directly e5. He doesn't even go for d4. Just go right in. And e6 is now a big threat. So takes, knight takes e5. So he goes king e7. And now bishop takes pawn is a very good idea. All of a sudden, all of white pieces are working beautifully well. So he takes. And black can take back here on c6, but will be met with rook c6. So he goes rook b3. It's not the best move. The best move now is rook c5 with the idea of rook a5. Putting the rook behind the passed pawn. Will Gukesh manage to find that move? Well, he plays rook to c4. And now the a pawn can push forward with a3. because rook c5 had this added advantage of going behind the pawn, and you could go here to a7, so like a4, and now rook going here means that I can take and king d6, and in such positions having the rook here on a5 would be very very much better. So for example, rook c5, a3, rook a5 takes king d6. Now the knight could come back. So these are little subtle points because you can now defend this, but they make the game very difficult for one side or easy. He plays a3, and now Gukesh down to his last few seconds. He takes on d7, and knight takes d7, but he goes a2, and now Gukesh is winning. Rook a4, he takes. Well, knight takes d7 can be met with king d7, but there's also rook d3 check somewhere, so you have to be careful there. But Gukesh has knight g6 check. It's the best move in the position. He plays it. Knight to g6 check. And after king f7, Gukesh chops off the pawn. Alan gets the pawn. And now white is a pawn up. Is winning the game because of the domination of the pawns, knight and the rook coming in. But it's not so simple. Rook check. King goes to f7. How do you kind of win the game? Maybe by playing rook a8, tying the knight because rook f8 is a mate, and then slowly trying to figure out a way to win. But it's not so simple. It's not at all trivial. He gives a check on h8. King comes to e7. And Gukesh comes back with a check, king f7. He comes back, knight f4, but all of a sudden his advantage starts to slip away. Knight f4. And now rook to f3 played, a good move, putting pressure on the knight. Knight jumps into e6. Oof. But the position is getting sharper and sharper now. Rook comes to d3. And one has to realize that for Gukesh, he doesn't have much time. He goes rook a7, but now Alan has an insane move, g5. Because if fg6, the knight is hanging. And if king comes up, then checkmate with rook takes pawn. So g5 is the move that kind of gives black some hopes. Alan plays it. He plays g5 with just 1 second on the clock. Wow. Takes, king takes, and now 3 pawns against a knight. It's very dangerous position. Rook d4. h4, he starts pushing. And it looks like it's much easier to play as white, but an excellent move here by Alan. He wants to get his knight to e5 to attack the g4 pawn. Rook check. He comes up, he blocks here, comes back to g8. These couple of repetitions help you gain 10 to 12 seconds. Rook comes up to stop the move, knight e5. But rook e4, he's going after that plan regardless. King h5. And now if you give a check, he comes in. And then if you take here, there's a mate. That's the problem. He gives a check, king g6. And now knight d7. So that if you give a check, I have a counter check. He does give a check, knight f8, counter check. g4 is hanging, so you want to move your king. King g5 played. And Alan now can bring his king up. He goes king f7. Somehow Gukesh is not able to make much progress here. That's his problem. Check. King goes back. And now you may want to play a move like h5, but there is knight h7 check here. He does play it, h5 on the board. Knight h7 check seems like the right move. King goes to h6. And now if rook takes g4, there is rook takes h7. He takes here, rook takes knight. And rook to f4, a big mistake. He had to stay here on the g file. Now check, king f8, and maybe just even moving the rook away, because rook f5 you can just go king g6 followed by a check, smoking the king out, and the h pawn runs. He goes rook g5, he makes a mistake. He gives Alan the chance, he takes it. King f7, and now king h7 played. Black can hold this one. Just king f6 maybe. He goes king f6. And Gukesh goes rook g8. You can't take here with any of this because of check and trades. So king f7, rook g7 check, and now king f6 is a forced move. He plays it. And Gukesh goes king g8. Now very important to go after the h pawn here. Super important, but he goes rook a4. That's a big error because now rook f7 check is winning the game. It's a beautiful move because it saves the pawn, and he finds it. King g5, and now f6. Beautiful chess. As if check, I can come up. He takes the pawn, and now rook goes to d7. He's threatening to make a queen here with f7, f8, rook g4 check. But now rook g7 gains an important tempo. Next move I have f7, f8. Alan Pichot, he was so close to holding this, but Gukesh's resilience and will to win triumphed in the end. A brilliant game here by both the players, especially Gukesh, who managed to score his third win in a row. And Alan has that smile on his face. He really enjoyed playing that game against Gukesh with a nice fight. And yeah, I think as Gukesh says, he felt he was better, but somehow he couldn't win it and missed this move, maybe g5, and that 3 pawns and rook versus rook and knight was not at all easy. Great game by both these players, and was really enjoyable. And there you see Gukesh saying rook 8, rook d8. I should have tied you down instead of doing this. For sure, the players immediately know what the best moves are, but sometimes in the pressure of the game, it's not so easy to execute the right moves. All these years, ChessBase was a software that needed to be installed on your computer. But now, ChessBase has come up with a mobile app. It's called the ChessBase mobile app, and it is available both on Android and iPhone. With the app, you can now prepare against an opponent. You can get access to more than 11 million games in your database. You can create a new game, analyze it. The premium users get access to the fastest cloud engines, and then you can save your analysis. What's more is that the app is completely free. If you want to stay connected to serious chess preparation on the go, then the ChessBase mobile app is for you.